I don't know. Maybe this technology is just boggles my brain. It just doesn't quite work the way I'd like it some days. Like I said, it's typical of a fat man. I'm a day late, a day short, dollar late, 10 cents overdue. Everybody's talking about, why I still game, and yet I also believe there was a question, how did we get started? And then something about the Satanic panic. And that roll off the tongue, right? Well, technically, I guess that's 3 different videos or 3 different responses or 3 combo responses or whatever. I just got done viewing Grumpy GM, Grumpy Cat. I know you don't like that, but hey, you're a good guy. And Ivan the Terrible there, his 2 cents worth on it. He's a good. I like a lot of his stuff. Some of it better than others, but it's all better than mine. No questions there. Good guys. Right now I'm from my rolling office again. I'm parked it's a different day. I'm parked in front of a different establishment. Same hose hanging out the back of the truck into a different manhole, slurping out some really slimy stuff. This is the stuff that you don't want in your plumbing at your house, so your local communities, at least most of them, have ordinances to prevent restaurants from just dumping this into the main city sewer system. Hence, creates jobs for slobs like me when the truck works, right? Well, when I got started in this stuff, when I was really young, I want to say 7 or 8, okay? Now, it was a long time ago, so I can't be 100% sure of what freaking day or year or time or what the weather was like or what was going on the TV at the time, because I didn't pay attention to a lot of that stuff when I was that age. One of my best friends, his older brother, was into this stuff, into the very early stuff. And so we're talking mid-70s, right? Early 75-ish. And we went to elementary school together, and Richie lived just down the street from the school. And on Wednesdays, the school got out a couple hours early. The elementary got out technically an hour before the high school kids got out, because they used the same buses. So we would rush home to his house, sneak into his brother's Foot Locker, and ignore the 3 Foot Lockers full of comic books and stuff, because back then his brother was a comic book fiend and believed in keep them in the plastic wraps and all that stuff long before it became vogue. So I imagine he's got a few pennies in his collection now. But he also had some gaming stuff. Now I want to say swords and sorcery, maybe an early palladium thing. I'm not sure exactly. And I know we played D&D. I want to say it was the very first issued mass market D&D, but I can't quote that. I really cannot. I know that we didn't know what we were doing. Richie knew a bit more about it because his brother, he conned his brother into letting him play occasionally, and he was teaching me, and I got hooked on it. So that was our first experience. My first experience was a few hours, because by the time the high school buses got to our bus stop, our area of the small town and the huge community, the farming community that the high school served, which is the entire quarter of the county at the time, it would be about 2 hours. So we'd steal about 2 hours every week, and this went on for, good through the winter that year. Come spring, a new kid moved to town just up the street from my family, and I got to know him, and he was another gaming nut, and he had a few things, but just like us, he didn't have much, didn't have a lot. So I went, and one day he gave me a call. He says, "Hey, my dad's going to take me over to a gaming store. Do you want to go?" And I'd never heard of anything like this. And of course, there was something, dark and twisted about sneaking out of my folks' house and hitching a ride 20 miles away to go to a place I'd never been to. They had some sort of, if you'd mentioned it to the adult community where I came from, they equated it to an adult bookstore. The sour sidelong looks at you, and the hush stuff, and the don't you mess with that kind of thing. That was a huge, thickly religious community, and it had its, a lot of negative detractors, and I didn't understand why. didn't understand that for some years, right, till I got old. And still don't understand some of the mindset. Anyway, I hitched that ride over to a place called Ivor's Dungeon. That's why I like Ivan, right? Ivor's Dungeon. It actually had a dungeony look. It had an old, archaic, Middle Ages kind of style to the building, covered in ivy. Had this round top, thick door that looked like something out of a dungeon, and a big iron knocker on it with a big heavy handle you pull on. It was a small store, really, to be honest, that first one, but it was just chock full of stuff. Now back then, the lion's share of Ivor's business was wargaming. The wargaming community was much more established before the RPG community came along, which I don't think a lot of people talk about that side of things, but they're connected to a limited degree. And so you'd go in there and all those lead miniatures and stuff that we grew up with, that we, collected and painted and mutilated and lost and found and so on and so forth, collecting dust on our shelves. Those started out with those tabletop wargaming groups. That's what they were, is these little tin soldiers, little plastic soldiers that for grown-ups. And he had a few other odds and ends in there, but he had a nice selection of stuff. And it was all first edition D&D and other things that were coming out, and some older stuff that was starting to get moved to the lower shelves that nobody seemed to want anymore. Most of the material back then was cheaply made. That's one of the reasons a lot of stuff didn't make it through to the current age, because unless you took care of it or got lucky. I got lucky on some of my stuff. My original Judges Guild stuff, for example, is made off of some pretty 2-bit paper that theoretically ought to be, falling apart by now, just from the paper mites and other critters and age. But I digress. So I got my first box set, the basic set, from there, and my friend Richie Gilson and this other fellow, I can't remember because he didn't live then. He moved away a year later. He didn't stay in town that long. We basically became obsessed with it that summer, and we spent the entire summer more or less indoors at this guy's house, because he had a huge upstairs room that was available that we could use, and the house was air conditioned. Mine and Richie's was not. So summers in Iowa can be pretty humid and foul on certain stretches of time. But we became obsessed with it. So I guess myself probably more than the other two, but I really got into it. I also discovered through the back of the box set that I got, somewhere in there was a flyer that gave me the address to the company, so I could write to them and get a catalog. See, those old guys and old gals remember you had to get catalogs or know people who knew people, or have a bookstore that you could go get this stuff from. And the regular bookstores didn't generally carry this sort of thing. You had to have a specialty store. And so we didn't have the internet, as I've said before. And so I ordered my first online order, my first out of the box, so to speak, catalog order was the Expert box set when it came out. I also ordered the Gamma World, and I ordered Space Opera. Oh, I love Space Opera. I played the Jesus out. My best friend, he bought Boot Hill, and he bought Traveler. Now, all this is lumping together over those early years, because obviously it didn't all come out, at that one time. But between 75 and 76 and 1980, we were still acquiring stuff this way. It wasn't until 82 or 83 I got my driver's license, and I was old enough to have a car, and I started going to the Ivors. At that point, it was something else. He'd moved to a different location. He moved several times in the first 20 years, and I was going there quite frequently. And I would average $25 to $50 every paycheck at the game store, quite religiously. It was like a drug dealer's house in some aspect. If I didn't show up, I would call me and make sure I was okay. I was such a regular customer, And you figure $50 back in the 80s was a lot of money. Compared to today, you can barely get one book for $50. And some of these game systems and stuff coming out now are just absurdly expensive. Yeah, I get it. Great paper, great graphics, all that other stuff. Awesome. But not so good for the rest of us. Now when it comes to the deep pockets, or those who don't have deep pockets in my case, right? Anyway, so that's how I got started, right? So the satanic thing, well, I've made some comments and stuff to that effect. It hit our town pretty hard. Mostly, we had those TV evangelist types were really ramping it up. And there were some people in the news that supposedly, some kids and teenagers did some stupid stuff. A couple of them killed somebody, and they were trying to use the D&D defense. I play Dungeons and Dragons, and I got possessed by a demon, and the demon and they cast spells on me, and yeah, right. So I became an unwitting advocate for the gaming community in my local community, which didn't make me overly popular with a lot of people's parents, which already a social outcast to some degree made it even a little more tougher. I actually had some people that I were kind of vaguely friends with that no longer were friends with because their parents didn't want them to associate with me and my little twisted satanic whatever friend, and which was sad because none of us were satanic worshipers or any of that stuff. Born again Christians. Okay, maybe, any Christian, any kid born into a religious family, it was kind of shoved down your throat whether you wanted it or not. I got mixed opinions on that now. Anyway, I know that my mother, I came home from school and my mother was in a tizzy. She had all my D&D books stacked up, just the D&D books. I had some early Star Wars stuff. I had, like I said, my space opera. I had a lot of other stuff that I had been collecting and buying, and she didn't seem to be fazed by any of that, but the D&D, the Dungeons and Dragons was the one that everybody was screaming about, and on the TV, right? So, and the local preacher was thumping and hammering and squawking about it. And so Mom took it down to the pasture and set it on fire, my big old bonfire. And all I could think of was, geez, this is what my grandparents and my grandparents and great uncles and stuff fought World War II over, was to keep people from burning books and doing things like that. I couldn't understand it. I was a young teenager at that time. I really couldn't understand it. I was just horrified, appalled, and scared, to be truthful. I didn't know. I didn't believe in the demon crap. I mean, I acknowledge, when the Fiend Folio came out, or the Deities and Demigods came out, there was some pretty, shocking stuff for a small town kid, but nothing that made me think I wanted to go start gutting the neighbor's cats on the table. I love animals. I've beat a few people senseless for trying to do stupid things like running people's pets over and stuff. That was a long time ago. I was younger and angrier then. But the same thing goes. It's sad to hear that there's still that mentality out there today, right? I mean, come on, really? Well, when I was in high school, my junior senior year, I actually had to take a semester of debate for some reason. I got shanghaied into it, and I made the argument that the Bible has killed more people, or instigated more people to die, than any role-playing game ever created, any fantasy setting ever created. And it got me a B in the class, and also got me suspended and a stern lecture from the senior vice president of the high school, or principal of the high school, because we don't do things like that. What are you talking about? I brought a Bible to school. I bought a stack of D&D books to school, and I weighed them up and down. And my final deal was, look, if I pick up this Bible and I beat you to death with it, who instigated that? Who drove me to kill you with a Bible? Was it God? Was it the Word? Was it the Bible itself? Or was it something dysfunctional up here? Somebody else manipulating me because I'm naive. That's what happens with a lot of this satanic stuff. These people are being naive to some degree, or they need something to latch onto, and this is a brief thing, and that too shall pass. Just like a bad burrito, it will pass. You just got to write it out, right? Suffer the consequences and the side effects of it, but it will pass, thankfully. And I'm sorry that for the fellow that had to deal with that in his store. I'm sorry to hear that you had to deal with that sort of stuff. It's still people that sort of thing you expect to find in the backwoods of, you know, several states I won't name, so we don't get any hate mail going on. But satanic, whatever. Yeah, okay. You know, we got on that stuff right there. That's just whack. Then there's the, you know, why do I still game today? Because I like it. I enjoy it. I'm vested in it. I got a lot of stuff in it. I've got a university professorship degree in this stuff, if there was such a thing. Just by the sheer amount of it I've had and read and studied and reused and overused and modified and twisted around and what have you. So, not quite a doctorship, I guess. Something like that. Doctorship in D&D, right? If such a thing existed. So, you know, why not? Why not? Why do we play video games? I can equate this. Why are people obsessed with sports? Why are people so obsessed with professional sports? You know, to the point where they'll deck themselves out. They'll role play in a way, because they'll deck themselves out in all the finery and the fancy stuff that support their team. Have parties and tailgate parties and go to all the whatevers and so on and so forth. And they can debate all the stats and they can argue who's better. At the end of the day, isn't that how fantasy football got started? Ooh, you want to get some ugly arguments going there between the haves and have-nots and the gaming and the not gaming. Oh, don't you put me in the same category? It's not the same thing. Bullshit. I'm sorry. Bull hockey. It is what it is. There you go. My 2 cents worth. A day late. Half $1 short. I got more work to do. It's going to be a long, ugly day.